Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello, I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and welcome to Benchmark. We'll explore a variety of issues involving our justice system, our legal system, and how they relate to the citizens of the town of Colonie. Today, we're very fortunate to have a guest from Westchester County who has a very significant practice not only in criminal law, but also in a variety of civil cases as well. Her practice has certainly gotten her involved in significant issues with juvenile justice. And as we all know, juvenile justice is a very large issue confronting our entire court system here in the state of New York. Many of us are well aware of a variety of ways in which the court system has begun to approach significant issues that are developed through the juvenile justice system. Certainly our own Colonie Youth Court, which is actually a template for youth courts throughout our nation, has been a major player in handling a variety of issues involving juvenile justice. And please, let's welcome my good friend, Sherry Levin Wallach. And Sherry, thank you very much for coming here today, all the way from Westchester.
Good to be here, thank you.
Well, you know, Sherry, your background with criminal cases, not only starting as a prosecutor in Bronx County, which is certainly a great proving ground and trial ground for a variety of issues, certainly involving our young people as well, but also your practice today in Mount Kisco, New York, involving a variety of criminal matters as well, and your involvement with the New York State Bar Association in so many different committees. At one point, you were chair of the Young Lawyers Committee, which is certainly displays and underscores your commitment to not only young people, but young lawyers as well. And you continue your involvement today with the Trial Academy, which I look forward to hearing about, the Young Lawyers Trial Academy. I think you meet periodically throughout the year to train young lawyers and others and expose them to the legal system. And you're doing so much on behalf of the citizens of the state of New York. Let's start early on with your relationship with the Bronx County DA's office. What was the nature and extent of the types of cases and some of the things that you saw while in the Bronx County DA's office, which has led you to continue to stay involved in so many things today?
Well, I started my practice at the Bronx County DA's office as an assistant district attorney in 1995. And I stayed there for 4 years. And that office is an office that puts you through the system relatively quickly in learning how to handle various types of cases very early on in your career. We started, and I believe the assistants still start in criminal court, handling lower level offenses, misdemeanors, violations, and combinations of those. And then when I was there, I went down onto the Grand Jury Bureau, where I spent 6 months only indicting and investigating cases for indictment. A portion of that time I spent on indicting homicides. I believe it was about 2 months. And then I went on to a trial bureau where I handled mostly violent crime.
Well, I can just tell you, I can only imagine the volume that the office handles throughout the entire county. I know that we, in Colonie, we have a very large criminal docket, but I'm sure that you were exposed to a tremendous amount of cross-section of types of crimes. Were there typical crimes that seem to occur in Colonie? We have so many theft crimes. It seems to be a heavy part of our docket. Was that a focus, or were there much more serious issues that you found that were coming across your desk?
Well, I think there were a lot of serious issues, and I think that many of the cases can be serious even if they're misdemeanor level, as well as felony level. In my experience, in the general arraignments, would have about 300 to 400 people in the system on a shift, and there were 2 arraignment shifts that run, and I believe there still are. So there's 9 in the morning until about dinner time, and then they come up again after dinner and go till 1 in the morning. And there are generally about 300 to 400 people, I believe, in the system during that day. And it's getting those people through. That is just the basic arraignment. That's the first time anybody sees a judge.
Right.
So it can be anything from a disorderly conduct to a homicide for arraignment. And then from that, they are ferreted out, the cases are ferreted out into various bureaus, and if there's an indictment, then it's sent to the Supreme Court, where it's handled by the trial bureaus, the Domestic Violence Bureau, the Major Case Bureau. There was a homicide unit. The names of the units have changed over the years. And then there's, of course, a very significant narcotics bureau, which still exists. Now I know, when I was there was no drug court, but now there is a very active drug court in Bronx County as well.
Sherry, do you see, what I've seen here is that oftentimes a large part and portion of the criminal calendar seems to be addiction related. Was that as obvious in the types of cases that you were handling there, or were there other issues beyond mere addiction that seemed to be more prevailing?
Well, I think the issues in the Bronx and in the city are much more vast, and it's hard to place specifically one issue. There definitely was a tremendous amount of addiction-driven crime. A lot of lower-level drug crimes involving people who were users as people, they're referred to, meaning those people that aren't necessarily selling the drugs, but using the drugs to feed an addiction. And as I think anywhere, those types of incidences can feed into crimes of violence and crimes of involving stealing and economics. So it's hard to say that it's all addiction driven, because then there are many other reasons why crimes are happening. And as I think we well know, there's a significant amount of domestic violence, and domestic violence is a big part of the criminal docket. I think
it is.
Pretty much in any
bet.
Location right now as well. And that can also be addiction-driven or not, depending on the circumstance. It's a very interesting question, I think.
Now, did part of your exposure as a prosecutor in Bronx County also show you that you may have first met somebody as a victim and then they turn around and become a defendant later, and there's a cycle sometimes that seems to occur in the criminal justice system?
Well, I think that there can be a cycle. Oftentimes there is a cycle. Oftentimes your witness one day is your defendant the next day. That's very common, especially on the more serious crimes and the gang-related crimes. And what I tried to do is, oftentimes when I was and had a case involving juveniles, which oftentimes I did when I tried as a prosecutor, and now in my practice, I try to talk to then the victims, and now if it's the defendants, meaning that I'm representing my clients, about ways to renegotiate their lives to try to remove them from the possibility of falling back into the system. And sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not. I think in the Bronx, I remember specifically that there was a rash when I was there, and I don't know now specifically what the numbers would be, but I handled quite a lot of cases involving young people who would get into fights and then they were cutting each other with box cutters or knives. And you'd have these beautiful young women sitting in your office who had their arms and their faces even possibly cut up, and I'd ask them, well, do you carry a knife? Or, of course I do. I said, well, you can't. And then the position of what you're talking about changes slightly to talk to them about how to remove themselves. And unfortunately, some of these kids felt the need to carry weapons for protection. But unfortunately also, a lot of times, those that carry weapons have those weapons used upon themselves. And so I think that is something that with young people I always try to get through, that you don't need that kind of, you don't need to have a weapon, and that the weapon will only create more of an issue for you. That, I would say, that's how I saw a lot of it. And then also handling some of the more serious violent crimes, attempted murders, homicides. A lot of the witnesses and people involved are in somehow also related with the criminal justice system as possibly defendants in other cases, unrelated cases, sometimes related cases.
And not only, Sherry, are you now maintaining a private practice, a significant practice in Mount Kisco, New York, and carrying so much of your background and experience on to your clients today. But you give back so much to the State Bar Association as well. And I'm very interested to hear more about the Trial Academy that you implemented and that you run on behalf of, is it for young lawyers, or who is it for, and how is it done?
Well, I can't take all the credit because actually an attorney who's relatively local to here, Glens Falls practitioner Tucker Stancliffe, who was the chair of the Young Lawyers section the year after I was, he and I pretty much came up with the idea for it together. And we both had different backgrounds in teaching trial advocacy and taking trial advocacy courses. And we felt that it was a great program for the State Bar and something that the State Bar could offer to the younger attorneys and transitional attorneys. It wasn't only, although it was put on by the Young Lawyers section,
right.
And we ran the first inaugural program last March, and we're planning the next one for this March, and it was run at Cornell Law School last year. Initially, the plan was to run it biannually, but I have to say it was such a success, and we received such wonderful responses, both from the faculty and the attendees, the attendees were all attorneys, not students, but young attorneys or transitional attorneys, meaning they were going from one type of practice into another, that we decided to run it again. And Tucker is actually going to be chairing it this year, and I'll be teaching at it, which I love to do. So it came around when I was out of law school. Well, I was in law school. I took the NIDA or NIDA program, depending on where you're from in the state. You pronounce it differently, but it's the National Institute of Trial Advocacy. And I taught at that program for several years. And a lot of the people who were the faculty for the State Bar program were people that actually taught me when I was in law school, and that I've maintained friendships with and handled cases with. We now practice together throughout the years. And then, of course, many of the people there were not involved at all with NIDA, but had their own experiences teaching trial advocacy and trial work. And many of them were the members of the executive committee of the State Bar. The immediate past president, Michael Getnick, taught. The current president, Steve Younger, taught. The incoming president or president-elect, Vincent Doyle, taught and acted as a team leader, which was more required him to be there every day and kind of direct a group of students around. And I'll get into in a minute how that worked. But so anyhow, that and then when I was in the DA's office, I worked through the Boy Scouts of America Explorers Program, which my boss, Rob Johnson, is very involved with through his office in teaching high school students trial advocacy. And then we created the program, and the program was run kind of similar to the programs I had experienced. We had the attendees were attorneys from throughout the state, and in fact, just yesterday I had an attorney approach me and tell me what a wonderful experience they had there, and I constantly have that when I'm practicing in court, and that's really a nice thing.
Yes, it is.
And we ran the program through lectures in the morning on various aspects of trial advocacy, ranging from jury selection to closing statements. And the entire group, it was 57, I believe, or attendees all told. We limited it at 60. And the 57 attendees were in a moot court room listening to the lecture, and then they would break out into 4 groups. And those groups were assigned to rooms, and the team leader, as I just explained, and there were the team leaders, as I said, one was Vincent Doyle, the other was Tom O'Hearn, who's a relatively local practitioner up here.
That's right.
And Judge Mark Fox, who's a recently retired federal court judge from the Southern District, and Anthony Calalori, who's an attorney down from Long Island, who taught me trial techniques. So they were the team leaders. They would take a group of students, and then those students would perform a different aspect of the trial. They'd prepare, and they'd do a portion of a direct exam, a portion of a cross exam, and they'd be critiqued by not only the team leader, but 3 to 4 other practitioners that were there volunteering to do that. And then they would also be videotaped and taken to a video playback room with a practitioner who would then critique them So if somebody was telling them they were clicking their pen incessantly, they'd actually believe it when they saw it on the video.
Exactly.
And it was a great program. I think from what I heard, not only from the faculty but the attendees, the camaraderie amongst the faculty across the state was wonderful. And most of the practitioners were New York practitioners, although I did have Tommy Sharon, who used to run the National College of District Attorneys, from Cobb County, Georgia, up there, and the younger, the attendees, who weren't all young, I think their ages ranged quite wide, which was nice, became very close. And not only that, but the relationships formed between the faculty and the attendees, so that there were ongoing relationships that to this day faculty are mentoring attendees, and that's what I'm hearing when I run into people. So it's really, all told, I think everybody got something out of it, a lot out of it.
Well, I think it's fabulous that you continue to make yourself available in that way. And I believe you're also an officer in the criminal law section of the New York State Bar Association.
Criminal justice section.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah.
I'm the treasurer of the criminal justice section.
Tell me what type of things you get involved with in there. What do they cover?
Well, I've been a member for quite a while, recently active on the executive committee.
Sure.
Of the criminal justice section. I also sit as an at-large member of the State Bar Executive Committee. But at the criminal justice section, the section spends a great deal of time reviewing legislation that may affect criminal practitioners and commenting on it. It spends a great deal of time putting on programming for the practitioners to keep them up to date and educated in the changes in the law. As we know, it's constantly changing. We also have other subcommittees of the executive committee doing a variety of things within the criminal justice area of practice. And the criminal justice section is comprised of judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys. So the views are quite vast in the room, and it really makes it for a very productive section, and really helps practitioners, I think, get involved in what they're doing day to day. That's one of the reasons I love being involved with the Bar Association, is I feel that I have my hands on the pulse of the laws that I'm working with to some degree.
Well, I think it certainly spurs interaction between attorneys, certainly throughout the state. In fact, you and I have been asked by the president of the Bar Association to sit together with Judge Kaye, working on an attempt to promote the expansion of youth courts throughout the state. Currently, as many of our viewers know, we have 80 youth courts throughout the state of New York, and Colonie's youth court is certainly a fit example of how it works well. And I believe that you and I will be working on that issue with Judge Kaye, and even having a meeting here in our own Colonie court with Judge Kaye and you and so many other distinguished members of that committee in later October 2010 to continue to promote the success of youth courts throughout. And I think that you've had your own experiences in a variety of different ways, and we look forward to continuing to work on that. Do you find your experience with the giving back through the Bar Association has actually made you a more enlightened practitioner as well, and you get new ideas and new ways to look at things as well?
There's no question about it. There is no question about it. I get asked constantly from colleagues, family members, friends, why I spend so much time volunteering, because that's really what it is, in various committees with regard to the New York State Bar Association. And although I'm a member of other bar associations, I've just seemed to find my home there, although I am always available to other associations, my local association. But yes, I think that it keeps me apprised much more frequently and regularly of the changes in the laws, of the possible changes coming down in my particular areas of practice, but it also allows me to stay aware about what's happening in other areas and aspects of law that I don't necessarily practice on a day-to-day basis. It has provided such a wonderful network of friends and dear friends and colleagues, attorneys and judges that I work with on committees, I take out into my day-to-day practice, and we form relationships where if somebody calls me up and they say they've been arrested in Buffalo, well, I know I have a good friend in Buffalo. In fact, I just had a phone call for a referral. Somebody got arrested in Maine, and do I know anybody in Maine? Right. And actually, the funny thing about that is that I am a member of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, although not particularly active. And I immediately thought of that association and contacted a good friend and colleague who is both a member of New York State Bar and National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Needless to say, the end result came that, yes, we were able, in a matter of, I'd say, an hour, to find an attorney in Maine, or several, actually a couple different names that we referred out, but it came through both organizations and the combination of. So it's really a wonderful experience. I encourage it. I sit on the membership committee of the State Bar and have for, I think it's almost 7 years now. And I encourage membership all the time. In fact, if you ask the local DAs in my county, I'm always hounding them because they're young practitioners, and I'm always hounding them to join the State Bar and get more involved and come to some of the programs that I'm involved with. Because I just find that it really has helped me, and it's helped me in expanding and growing my own practice, just the connections and the contacts that I've made and the relationships I've formed.
Sherry, you find yourself in not only justice courts, but also Westchester County Court, I'm sure, as well. Any large differences between the practice in Westchester and in the Bronx? Any obvious differences of practice?
I practice right now, I have New York County, Bronx County, Westchester, Putnam, Orange, Rockland, and Dutchess. Orange and Dutchess are kind of a few cases every now and then. Rockland is becoming a little more frequent. So I see a vast span of practices. Yes. They are. I think any practitioner in New York State who goes into another county would say that, and even from one town to the next, that things are different, and the way that the practice of law is undertaken is done differently. That's right. Of course, it's always by having the laws control, but it's a matter of the way that you get to the same ends almost. Procedurally, there are some changes or policies that may change. I think the difference significantly from New York City and the Bronx into the Westchester and Putnam and so forth is the sheer volume that you're dealing with, and also the centralization of the courts. In the city, each county has a centralized criminal court that handles the lower level offenses, and then the Supreme Court, and it's in one building. You go to one place. As you come into the counties up here like Colonie and Westchester is very similar, you have the town and village and justice courts, and it's very decentralized. I think for me it's a question of mileage a lot.
That's right.
Because you spend a great deal of time in your car getting from point A to point B. And then, of course, the county court, which is the equivalent of the Supreme Court, is centralized in White Plains and Westchester and in Carmel and Putnam and so forth. But so yeah, there are many, many differences. But many of us have practiced in both areas or several different areas. And so I think you learn to understand and learn about the area in which you're practicing and practice accordingly. And I think that's what really helps, especially young attorneys or attorneys going out into their own practice, is to really take a chance and get to know where it is you're going. If I have a case in a place I don't know, I call up the clerk. Right. I ask about the court. I ask about the procedures. If there are court rules, which usually you find in Supreme and County Court and not so much in local court, but if the judge follows certain types of procedures, and right down to civil is different depending on where you go. Wow. Different forms are filled out. They're filled out in a different manner. Some in the city, you go into a part, you fill out a form, you get a copy of it right then and there. In Westchester, they mail you the copy of the preliminary conference order on a civil case. So those are many different ways that practices.
You know, when you and I were together with Judge Kay in her law office in Manhattan a few weeks ago, you raised an issue during that discussion that actually criminal matters in New York City are actually, the information complaints are drafted by the district attorney's office, I believe, and which is not necessarily the case here. In fact, most of the information complaints that are presented to me for arraignment are all drafted by the local police agency. So that's an interesting difference, I suppose.
It's a very significant difference, I think. And it's important to know that difference when you're practicing in the various places, I think, because when a matter comes through the district attorney's office, it's drafted, it's viewed, the victims or the complainants are interviewed oftentimes either in person, if it's a domestic violence, sometimes through a system of video conferencing, if you will. There's a term for it, but they're interviewed by the DAs immediately as the charges are being written out. Whereas in the counties up here where the police department is writing out those charges, oftentimes the district attorneys don't speak with the individuals till after arraignment. In fact, most of them, they don't even have the paperwork until the arraignment. And that makes a big difference, I think, for the way the cases are handled and also the way that they're disposed of. But and when I say disposed of, I mean the ultimate outcome.
That's right.
And so that's very significant. But when we're working with things like youth courts and drug courts, it's something that we need to be aware of and make sure that we consider when we're going to various agencies and asking them to participate, and how they participate depends on how the procedure, or what the procedure is that's used in that particular jurisdiction.
Well, Sherry Levin Wallach, you're on the move in a variety of different ways, and always in support of the enhancement of the legal system in the state of New York. And I was lucky enough to be able to have you come in on behalf of the citizens of the town of Colonie. Actually, you're in the area for a statewide conference, and I asked you to come cut some time out of your busy schedule to join us here today to share a little bit about your insight into the legal system and the things that you're working on today. You also have a family as well, and I'm sure that keeps you busy. You have some young children as well, is that correct?
I have 3 young children,
Yeah.
yes. 8, 6, and 4. So they do keep me busy.
I bet they do.
And they're wonderful.
And I bet there's some summertime activity I hope that you'll be able to all enjoy together at some point. Actually, the weather's been fabulous here in Colonie, New York for the summer. So
yeah, it's been a lucky summer.
Well, what's your next endeavor? We'll be working together for right through for the next year or so in connection with Judge Kay's committee. What else do you have on the burner?
Well, I think right now that's one of my new committees, and learning about the youth courts is one of the reasons I'm here. I'm actually going to the Colonie youth court training this evening and looking forward to it.
That's right.
I don't have a great deal of knowledge about the way the youth courts function, and so I'm really looking forward to learning about that. And also my state bar appointment to the executive committee, I consider that my newest endeavor and my participation in that for now, and as well as my other committees with the state bar, and of course always working on that practice to expand it.
Well, you've done a marvelous job there, and as a member of the state bar, I'm so glad that you are giving so much of your time to our organization in that way. And tonight, yes, you will be visiting the education component of the Colonie Youth Court, and you will hear a presentation about peer pressure, I think, this evening to those defendants that are currently serving out their sentence in the Colonie Youth Court. And I'm so happy that you expressed such an interest to see what was going on here, and that education component is an unusual component. Not all youth courts have that additional component. But on Tuesday evenings, that component takes place. And then, of course, Thursday evenings, all of the youth court participants are together, not just the defendants, but also those who volunteer to participate in a variety of court roles. And typically each year we'll graduate 100 or so who have participated in the program, not merely as defendants, but to play all the roles in the sentencing hearing procedure, from attorney to judge to prosecutor. It's a fabulous program, and you're so nice to want to learn more about what's going on here. And we're so happy that you're here in the town of Colonie, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
It's
you,
a pleasure.
Sherry. I'm Judge Peter Crummey, and thank you for joining me on Benchmark.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.